I still remember the day I walked out of the office for the last time like it was yesterday. My box of things was light. Just a few personal items, a framed photo of my family, a mug that said CFO Boss Lady, and a plaque for 20 years of service. 20 years. And just like that, it ended with a single sentence from the new CEO. You're a little too old school for where we're headed. He tried to dress it up with corporate language. Said the company needed a modern perspective and fresh energy, but I knew what it really meant. I was no longer shiny or exciting. I was experienced. I had built systems that had held the company together, balanced budgets in recessions, kept departments from sinking during chaos. But to him, I was a dusty old calculator in an age of flashy finance apps. His name was Devin. Devin Stone. 35, smooth-talking, flashy Harvard MBA with the confidence of someone who'd never failed at anything. The board brought him in after our last CEO retired, and in less than a month, he had changed half the executive team. I wasn't even surprised when my turn came. Still, it stung. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I stood up, shook his hand, and left quietly. No fireworks. No goodbye party. Just silence. A lot of people thought I'd take a hard, but I didn't, because I knew something Devin didn't. The company looked shiny on the outside. Big numbers, fast growth, press features. But deep underneath, it was messy, very messy. Messy in a way that only I had kept from becoming public. I had left detailed reports and transition documents. I wasn't petty, but I didn't tell him everything either, like where the accounts receivables were tangled, or how certain vendors only trusted me because of personal relationships, or that the new accounting software had a bug I was still patching with manual overrides. I had always played fair, but I wasn't going to stick around and babysit someone who saw me as a relic. The first few days after I left were quiet. My mornings were strange without the 6 a.m. emails and finance calls. My husband, Paul, kept telling me it was a blessing in disguise. You always said you wanted time to write your book. And now you can, he said, making me coffee one morning. But I couldn't relax. Something didn't sit right. I didn't like the way Devin had dismissed me. Not just professionally, but like I was disposable. Like everything I had built didn't matter. I started getting calls from former co-workers. Quiet ones at first. A junior accountant named Amy reached out just 3 weeks after I left. I'm sorry to bother you, she whispered over the phone like someone might be listening. But they changed the reporting system and everything's messed up. I tried explaining to Mr. Stone, but he said not to involve you. He said you just confuse the team. Confuse the team? I bit my lip. Okay, Amy, don't worry. Just send me what's not adding up. I'll take a look from home. More calls followed. From procurement, HR, even our lead investor relations guy. All of them had the same tone, worried, anxious, uncertain. Devin had cut out most of the finance leadership and replaced them with younger guys from his old firm. None of them knew the ins and outs of our systems. And they didn't ask. They just bulldozed ahead, breaking things along the way. Meanwhile, I was quiet, watching, listening, gathering everything. I started keeping a folder for later. Inside it were screenshots, anonymous tips, and finance spreadsheets sent by concerned employees. I wasn't planning anything evil, but I wasn't going to be caught unprepared if the house of cards came tumbling down. Then came the board meeting leak. I didn't mean to hear it, but I did. One of my friends from the board called me one night, just after midnight. Listen, I'm not supposed to tell you this, he began, but Devin's in trouble. The last quarter report was a disaster. Investors are furious, and someone mentioned your name in a not-so-great way. I sat up in bed. What do you mean? They're saying you left the books in a mess, that your old systems were outdated, that you failed to train your replacement. That was the moment I went from being silently hurt to quietly furious. You don't get to cut me out and then blame me for your failure. I didn't say anything. I just thanked him, hung up, and opened the folder I had been saving. The next morning, I drafted an anonymous email. It included clean versions of every system I had run, reports I had submitted, and records of the warnings I gave before leaving. I made sure to include timestamps, emails, and backup files. Then I sent it to the board's audit committee. Just facts. No emotion. Just truth. Less than 24 hours later, Devin sent out a company-wide email calling for a weekend work sprint to resolve back-end issues. I laughed. 2 days after that, I got a call from a familiar number. It was Devin. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Hey, this is Devin. I was hoping we could talk. We've been reviewing some things, and honestly, we could really use your insight, your experience. Maybe we could meet. I saved a message but didn't respond. That same evening, another message came through. Then another, each more urgent than the last. By the end of the week, he sent a formal offer to come back as a consultant. My price? Triple what I used to earn. And a clause that said I could work from home. No office politics. No meetings I didn't want. No Devin. As I stared at the offer, I thought about all the people who would call me old school, about how kindness had always been my greatest strength, and yet it was a thing most people underestimated. I smiled. I hadn't even begun to show him what old school could really do. But just as I was about to make my decision, something shocking happened that changed everything. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the knock came at my door. Not a phone call, not an email, an actual knock. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 8 a.m. Still in my robe, coffee in hand, I peeked through the blinds. My heart skipped. It was Devin, standing on my front porch. He looked nothing like the smug, confident man who'd fired me 2 months ago. His tie was crooked. His eyes had dark bags under them. And his once perfect posture was slouched, like the weight of the company was finally crushing him. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. Devin? Janet, please, he said quickly. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. You think showing up at my home is appropriate? I asked, arms crossed. After calling me outdated and tossing me out like expired milk? I was wrong, he said, voice shaky. I didn't realize how much you were holding together until everything started falling apart. I didn't respond. He looked past me into the house like he was searching for an answer. I need your help. The numbers are all over the place. Vendors are pulling out. Payroll almost failed last Friday. Legal's on edge. And the board, they're talking about pulling me. A flicker of guilt passed through me, but I kept my expression blank. He sighed and pulled out a manila envelope. I brought a revised offer. Double your old pay. Full authority over finance and operations. Remote if you prefer. You can pick your own team. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Think about it, he said. Please. I didn't know what I didn't know. And just like that, he turned and walked off my porch, shoulders drooping like a whipped dog. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. This was the moment. The revenge I never even asked for had arrived, gift-wrapped and hand-delivered to my door. But something inside me wasn't cheering. I went back to the kitchen and opened the envelope. The offer was real. The numbers were beyond generous. My name was already listed as interim CFO and strategic advisor. Still, a little voice inside asked, do I even want to go back? That afternoon, I took a long walk by the lake near my house. I needed clarity. Peace. I sat on a bench and watched ducks glide across the water. A group of teenagers were filming a TikTok nearby, their laughter echoing through the trees. Life outside that corporate world looked simple, clean, honest. But deep down, I knew I wasn't done. Not yet. It wasn't about the money, or even the revenge. It was about legacy. I had given 20 years to that company. My systems, my sweat, my sleepless nights. If it was going down in flames, I wasn't going to let that happen from the sidelines. But I wasn't going to jump in recklessly either. Before accepting, I needed leverage. I spent the next 2 days reviewing every report the internal team had sent me. I dissected the financials, flagged fraudulent entries, traced vendor issues, and found over a dozen places where the company was bleeding money. Some of the decisions made under Devin's watch were not just reckless. They were potentially illegal. I drafted a 21-page report. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I asked for a Zoom meeting with Devin, his legal team, and 2 board members. I wanted everything recorded, everything documented. At the meeting, I shared my screen and began walking them through the report, line by line, dollar by dollar. Devin looked like he was going to throw up. The board members were stone-faced. Legal kept scribbling notes. Halfway through the call, Devin interrupted me. Wait. You mean these losses could have been avoided? I nodded. If you had followed the protocols I left behind? Yes. One of the board members leaned forward. Why didn't your current CFO flag this, Devin? Devin looked cornered. He said the old methods were too slow. We needed agility. I raised a brow. You wanted speed. You got chaos. Silence. Then the other board member spoke. Janet, if we restructure things under your control, would you be willing to come back and clean this up? I pretended to think. Then I smiled slightly. Under 2 conditions. 1, I answer only to the board, not Devin. 2, I bring in my own team. No questions asked. They agreed immediately. Even Devin didn't argue. That same day, I sent out 6 job offers to the most brilliant people I had ever worked with. People Devin had ignored. One of them cried when they got the call. But just when things were looking up, one of my new hires, Ellie, flagged something. Janet, you might want to see this. It's a hidden account. What kind of hidden? She turned her laptop around. A vendor payment loop. Same company invoicing us every 2 weeks. But it's not listed in our actual vendor contracts. And I traced the address. It leads to a mailbox registered in Devin's name. My stomach dropped. I leaned in. Are you saying he's been siphoning money? Ellie nodded. Looks like it. Quietly. Since his 2nd month on the job. I stared at the screen, pulse racing. Now the question wasn't if he needed to go. It was how hard he was going to fall. I couldn't sleep that night. Ellie's discovery haunted me. I kept pacing back and forth in my home office, staring at the folders she had assembled. The data didn't lie. Devin had created a shell vendor account, listed under a fake company name, and routed close to $200,000 into it over the last 5 months. Each transaction was carefully hidden inside routine operations costs, just small enough to avoid raising red flags. But now, I had the red flag in my hands. It would have been so easy to take this straight to the board, to call a meeting, present the evidence, and watch him get hauled out by security while trying to save face. I could already imagine the headlines. Hotshot CEO ousted in finance scandal, replaced by the very woman he fired. But this wasn't just about watching him crash. This was about restoring integrity. The company had been my second home for 20 years. I didn't want it dragged to mud, not if I could help it. And I especially didn't want the employees, people like Amy, Ellie, and dozens of others caught in the blowback. If the company's stock crashed because of a public scandal, people would lose their jobs, their benefits, their families would suffer. So I had to be smart. That morning, I called in my lawyer, Grace. She'd worked with me for over a decade and had a no-nonsense style that could melt a courtroom. We met at a quiet cafe. After showing her everything, she leaned back, tapped the edge of her cup, and said, "If you want him gone quietly, we need to trap him legally. You can't just accuse him in front of the board and hope it sticks. We'll need signed approvals, timestamps, a chain of emails. We need to make this airtight." I nodded slowly. I want it clean. No room for him to spin it into a smear campaign against me. Grace smirked. Then let's make sure he hands us the noose himself. Over the next week, I worked with Ellie and Grace to quietly build the case. We created a fake vendor request from a dummy company and submitted it through the finance portal. Devin approved it, just like he had done with the others. That approval gave us everything we needed: date, time, digital signature, and a traceable pattern matching all his past shady approvals. We had him. Meanwhile, I played my role perfectly. I attended meetings, cleaned up the books, helped secure 3 major vendor relationships that were on the edge of walking away. I even helped recover an investment partnership that Devin had nearly fumbled with his arrogant negotiation tactics. The board praised me. Devin tried to act cordial, even respectful now. but I could see the fear behind his eyes every time I spoke. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know when. Then came the shareholder summit. Every quarter, we held a private event for our top investors. This time, I insisted we go old school, an in-person gathering at our headquarters, followed by a private presentation from both the CEO and CFO. Devin looked smug walking into the conference room that day. Hair slicked back, navy blue suit too tight around the chest like he was trying to impress someone. He began the presentation with his usual smooth lines. Growth potential, market expansion, the new direction. It was all fluff. All style, no substance. Then it was my turn. I walked up to the podium, clicked to the next slide, and displayed a single number on the screen. $197,482.67. The room fell silent. This is the amount lost to a single unauthorized vendor account over 5 months. I began calmly, my voice clear. This figure, buried within operational expenses, was redirected to a shell company, one not listed in any official vendor contracts, nor verified by our finance department. A company registered under an alias, and the person who approved every single one of those payments is our current CEO. A gasp rippled through the room. Devin's face drained of color. He stood, stammering. That's not. I raised a hand, cutting him off. I brought documentation. I continued. Screenshots, bank trails, approval timestamps, and matching transaction logs. All submitted to our legal team and confirmed. 2 board members stood immediately. One of them turned toward Devin. "Please step outside," he said firmly. "I didn't know," Devin muttered. "It must be a mistake." But no one moved to help him. He left the room, surrounded by silence. After the door shut, I turned back to the investors. My team and I have already implemented measures to recover the lost funds, patch our internal systems, and restore trust with our partners. And if approved by the board, I'm prepared to resume full duties as Chief Financial Officer to guide us through this transition. The applause was quiet at first, then louder, full, respectful. That evening, Devin resigned for personal reasons. It hit the news the next day, but the details were vague, just like I planned. No leaks, no drama. The company stock barely moved, and internally, we spun it as a change in leadership strategy. But the staff knew. They didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in their eyes. The nods in the hallway. The emails signed with thank you. Even Amy sent me flowers with a note that read, "They replaced the compass with a mirror. Thank you for bringing direction back." I thought that was the end of it, until a few days later, I got a phone call from someone I never expected. Devin's former executive assistant. "Janet, there's something you should know," she whispered, her voice trembling. He wasn't just moving money. He was hiding something else, something bigger, and I think you're in danger. Her voice was shaky, almost breathless, like she was whispering in a room full of ghosts. "Wait," I said slowly, stepping into my study and shutting the door behind me. "Start from the beginning. What do you mean, danger?" On the other end, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "My name's Clarissa," she said. "I was Devin's assistant for 6 months. I know I never spoke to you much, but I saw things. Weird things. Meetings that didn't show on his calendar. Calls taken in his car late at night. Private USB drives locked in his bottom drawer. He had a second phone. Hidden contracts. Janet, it's not just embezzlement." My stomach tightened. I had thought Devin's greed was the worst of it. Embezzlement, lies, fraud. But this was something else entirely. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "I was scared," she admitted. "But after what you did at the summit, I knew someone had to say something. And I found something on his desk the day he was forced out." She paused. "It's a folder labeled Project Hawk. It's not on any company system. And it has documents, financial transfers to offshore accounts, communications with third-party developers in Eastern Europe, even a draft of a software integration plan. Except none of this ever went through IT. He was hiding it from the entire company." I sat down slowly. "You're telling me he was building something?" Yes, she said, but not for us, for himself. She continued. The folder also mentioned internal logins, employee credentials, and your name, Janet. I think he was trying to clone or breach systems using your identity. There's even a paper trail that makes it look like you approved some of the hidden contracts. I went cold. My name, my credentials, my signature. Devin wasn't just stealing money. He was setting me up, and now that he was gone, if any of that surfaced, I'd be the one holding the bag. My hands trembled slightly as I whispered, "Do you still have the folder?" "I do," Clarissa replied, "but I'm scared if it gets out that I took it." "Clarissa," I cut in gently. "You did the right thing. I'll protect you. I promise. Can you get it to me?" "I'll meet you," she said, "somewhere public. Tonight." We agreed on a small 24-hour diner just outside the city. I wore a plain jacket and tied my hair back, not wanting to draw attention. I arrived early, sat by a window booth, and waited. 15 minutes later, Clarissa walked in. She looked nervous, eyes scanning the room like she expected someone to follow her. She had a small gray tote bag clutched in both arms. She slid into the booth across from me, handed over the bag without a word, and finally looked up. "You have no idea how deep this goes," she whispered. Inside the bag was a folder, over an inch thick. It was stuffed with pages, USB drives, scribbled notes, and printouts of bank transactions. She wasn't lying. It was a project, but not one I had ever seen. As I flipped through it, a pattern began to emerge. Devin had been building a parallel company, using our assets, our resources, our staff. He had already created a shadow database with the names and emails of over 3,000 clients, all scraped from our CRM. There were template invoices and service agreements made to look like ours, but branded under a different company name, Hawkridge Analytics. Worse, some of the employees on the documents were real, people on our staff. Their names were being used without their knowledge. He had been using our infrastructure to build a rival company, all while getting paid by us. I stared down at the documents, heart racing. This wasn't just fraud. This was corporate sabotage. I looked up at Clarissa, who was now sipping tea with trembling hands. "We're going to stop him," I said softly, "but we have to be careful." Devin might have been gone from the company, but he wasn't done, not by a long shot. I immediately called Grace and told her everything. She picked up on the second ring. "I had a feeling," she muttered. "This guy always struck me as too slick for a simple embezzlement scheme. Janet, we're going to need to bring in the feds." "Are you sure?" I asked. Grace didn't hesitate. "This involves international banking, stolen data, and possible cybercrime. We're talking jail time. We'll need to act fast before he deletes or moves anything." The next 72 hours were a blur. We submitted everything to the FBI's white-collar crimes division. I handed over Clarissa's folder, and they assigned a case agent almost immediately. Turns out, this wasn't Devin's first rodeo. He'd been investigated briefly during his time at another tech firm, but the case never made it past preliminary stages due to insufficient evidence. Now, with everything we had collected, he wouldn't be so lucky. But I didn't stop there. With Grace's help, we informed the board of directors and temporarily froze all accounts associated with Devin's name. We launched a company-wide audit. Then I personally spoke with every department lead to reassure them that the company was safe, and that we were in control now. There was a buzz of unity I hadn't felt in years. But the biggest shock? Just 3 days after we filed a report, I got a call from the FBI agent. "Ma'am," he said, "we traced Devin's last credit card use to a private airstrip. He boarded a jet bound for the Cayman Islands 4 days ago. We believe he's attempting to move his assets offshore and disappear." He paused. "But you won't believe what he left behind." I held my breath. "What?" I asked. There was a long pause. "We found his second phone," the agent said, "and the last message he sent was to you.